10 crops, 1 window. That is most of what a September container really comes down to. You just pulled the last tomato plant and stared at an empty pot, half expecting the season to be over. It is not. Radish gets there in 22 days. Turnip gets there twice, greens first, then the root, out of the same packet of seed. And one crop on this list keeps producing after a hard freeze has already shut down everything else in your yard. A plant almost nobody growing food in this country has ever tried. Miss the right week for even one of these, and you are looking at an empty container until spring instead of a full one until Thanksgiving. Tell me your zone below, because the crop that still has 3 weeks left where you are might already be out of time somewhere colder. Number 1. Radish. You've still got 3 weeks to plant something you can actually eat before Halloween, and this is the one that gets there fastest. That pot of peppers you just pulled off the patio, the one sitting empty with soil that hasn't even cooled off yet, is ready right now. Drop radish seed in it this afternoon. Do not wait for the weekend. Do not bother clearing out the old pepper roots first. The dirt is already primed, and radish does not care what grew there before. First-year container gardeners tend to treat radish as an afterthought, something tossed in between the real vegetables while they wait for the next tomato start. That gets the whole crop backwards. From Zone 4 up through Zone 9, this is one of the few crops on the list that direct sows now with zero risk of running out of time. In a season this tight, radish is the safest bet on your entire patio. If frost shows up early this year, before your kale or your carrots have even finished sizing up, radish has already been harvested and eaten twice over, and the container is free again for something else. Here is the part that changes everything about timing. Not every radish fits a container the same way. Long types like daikon or French breakfast need a deep pot, 10 to 12 inches, and they take longer getting there. Cram one into a shallow 6-inch container and the root hits bottom. It curls. Sometimes it cracks straight down the middle. Round types like Cherry Belle or Early Scarlet Globe skip that problem entirely. 6 to 8 inches of soil is plenty, because the shape grows down and out instead of straight down. Not even close in how much easier that is on the plant. Here's the number that actually matters. Sow the seed a ½ inch deep. Thin the seedlings to about 1 or 2 inches apart once they sprout. That is the entire setup, start to finish. Cherry Belle wraps up in roughly 24 to 28 days. Even the slower globe types finish by day 30. Sow a fresh row every 10 to 14 days right up until frost actually threatens, and you stack harvests instead of one small batch. Pick the wrong shape for a shallow pot, and you end up with a stunted, cracked root that is more trouble than it is worth peeling. Pick round, and the container never fights you back. 22 days, not a typo. Number 2, kale. The pot of tomatoes you just pulled is still warm from the sun. Kale doesn't mind moving in right behind it. If you've been treating your empty container like the season's over, this is the plant that tells you otherwise. What the seed packet does not tell you is that kale doesn't just survive cold. It gets better because of it, and September still leaves enough runway for most zones to grow a full-size plant from seed, not just a transplant bought half-grown at the store. Frost doesn't hurt kale, it changes the flavor, and the fix happens right inside the leaf. Cold nights drop close to freezing, and the plant reacts by converting the starch stored in its leaves into sugar. Not luck, chemistry. That sugar works almost like antifreeze, keeping the cells from rupturing when ice starts to form. What that actually means for your kale is a sweeter, less bitter leaf than anything picked back in August. Stop dreading the first hard frost. It is doing your kale a favor. Down to specifics. Dwarf blue curled Scotch stays compact and handles cold down toward the low 20s, sometimes lower. Red Russian finishes faster, around 50 days, and works well if you're sowing later in the month. Either one grows fine from Zone 2 through Zone 11 as a fall crop. Give it a container 10 to 12 inches deep so the roots have room to spread. Direct sown. Expect 50 to 60 days to full size, though you can start cutting baby leaves for salad in as little as 3 weeks. In colder zones 4 and 5, if you're sowing after the first week of September, lean toward Red Russian over a slower variety. The extra 10 days can matter. The frost isn't the enemy here, it's the seasoning. Number 3. Spinach. Spinach hates July. It's been sitting this whole summer out, waiting for exactly this week. The piece every fall planting guide leaves out is that spinach didn't just wait out summer, it fought it. Everyone calls spinach a fall crop, like it's some kind of backup plan. When the real story is, the plant spent months fighting conditions that had nothing to do with it being weak. September isn't spinach settling for less. It's the first month all year the plant actually gets what it wants, and it fits into containers barely deep enough for your smallest pots. If there's one crop on this list worth judging on its fall performance instead of its spring one, it's this. Here's what's actually happening underground, or rather up in the leaves. Long daylight is a signal your spinach reads like a countdown, not just weather. Once daylight stretches past about 14 hours, or the air climbs above 75 degrees, the plant treats that as its cue to rush toward seed. The leaves turn bitter fast, and the whole plant bolts upward, racing to make seed before the heat kills it. September switches that signal off for you. Shorter days, cooler nights, and your spinach just grows leaves instead of racing to flower. So skip the summer sowing entirely and give it this window instead. A lot of container gardeners give up on spinach after one bolted spring crop. Fall spinach is a completely different plant to grow. The timing here is exact, not a ballpark guess. Bloomsdale long-standing handles cold down to about 15 degrees and works from zone 3 through zone 9. Give it a container 6 to 8 inches deep. Direct sown, full-size leaves take around 45 to 52 days, though you can start cutting baby leaves in as little as 30. If your first frost usually lands before mid-October, don't wait on full size. Harvest baby leaf instead and skip the risk entirely. Sown now, it beats the heat it never had to fight. Number 4. Carrots. Everyone tells you carrots are a fall classic. Almost none of them tell you the carrot they're picturing already missed its window. Nobody puts this in the how-to guides. A credit, the kind on every seed rack, needs 65 to 90 days and a pot at least 12 inches deep, so that in September and you're racing a clock you cannot win in most zones. The seed packet never mentions the shape problem. It just assumes you have a raised bed and all summer. I lined up a round carrot next to a standard one from the same September sowing, and it was not even close. Round types like Paris Market, Thumbelina, and Parisienne only need 50 to 65 days, and a pot as shallow as 5 to 6 inches. Same vegetable family, one shape built for your 6-inch pot. These round varieties were bred in 19th century France for shallow rocky soil that standard long carrots could never push through. Market gardeners outside Paris needed something that would size up fast in ground too thin for a foot-long root. That is not a weaker carrot. That is the right tool for a job most people are using the wrong tool for. The reason comes down to something simple. Carrot roots store starch, and once night temperatures drop below 50 degrees, that starch converts to sugar. Simple as that. It is the same trick that protects the cells from freezing, and it happens to make the root taste sweeter than anything you would pull in July. Wait for a couple of light frosts before you harvest, and the difference in taste is obvious by the first bite. I went looking for the reason nobody puts this shape difference on the seed rack, and found it in a University of Maryland extension guide. Count back 10 to 12 weeks from your first frost, and that's your safe window for any fall carrot, round or long. This is where the guessing stops. Sow a 1/4 inch deep, thin to about 1.5 inches to 3 inches apart. 50 to 65 days later, You are pulling round sweet carrots out of a pot that would have been too shallow for anything else on a seed rack. You skip the trip back to the garden center for a taller container, and you skip the guessing game of forcing a 12-inch root into a 6-inch pot. You've bought a seed packet of regular carrots for a container before, sown them in September, and ended up with stubby, forked little roots that never filled out. The carrot wasn't the problem. The shape was. In Zone 4 or 5, sowing after September 10th puts even the 50-day round type close to the edge. Get it in the ground the first week of the month, or plan on pulling smaller roots before that first hard frost hits. Same vegetable, different shape. Completely different math. If this level of detail on picking the right carrot for a container is what you've been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every entry on this list gets the same treatment. But the twist on that carrot isn't even the strangest one on this list. Wait until you see what's still producing salad after everything else has quit. Number 5. Arugula. This is the one that goes from a bag of seed to a peppery bite on a sandwich faster than almost anything else on this list. I almost left arugula off this list as an afterthought, and that would have been the wrong call. At the scale of one small container, arugula is not just fast, it is close to instant compared to everything else on this list. Drop seed in a window box barely deeper than your hand, and you are not waiting on a full-size plant to make it worth growing. This is one of the few crops on the list where the window barely matters. Because it closes and reopens every 3 weeks, you keep sowing. The exact depth looks like this. Astro finishes a few days ahead of standard arugula and comes in milder, which matters if you are new to the peppery bite. 6 to 8 inches of soil is enough, and it grows fine from Zone 2 through Zone 11. A full rosette takes about 40 days, though you can start snipping baby leaves for a sandwich in as little as 21 to 25. Cold tolerance runs around 20 degrees for standard types, and a specialty variety like Even Star Winter pushes that down to 6. Cut and come again is the part that stretches your one-seed packet. You are not pulling the whole plant. Snip the outer leaves, leave the center growing, and it keeps handing you more within days. Barely any effort required. If your patio only has room for one more small pot, this is the one that pays you back the fastest. Leave the soil dry, or let it bake under the last of September's heat, and the peppery bite turns sharp fast. Keep the soil evenly moist and the flavor stays mild. 40 days, start to finish, and it barely asks for anything. Number 6. Lettuce. The lettuce you bought in June bolted before you got 3 salads out of it. September lettuce doesn't have that problem. Once you see what daylight length actually does, the bolting problem stops being a mystery. Everyone blames summer heat for bitter, bolted lettuce, but the real hidden variable is heat stacked on top of long daylight hours. September drops both at once. The days shorten, the nights cool off, and the plant stops racing to flower. Loose-leaf types beat head-type lettuce by weeks, and the reason comes down to effort. A head-type variety, like romaine, has to fold its leaves into a tight, dense head before it is worth harvesting to you. Loose-leaf skips that step entirely and just keeps producing flat leaves for your bowl, one after another. Fewer growth stages means less time on your clock. Loose-leaf wraps up in 40 to 50 days. Romaine needs 70 to 85. Crisphead runs even longer, 70 to 100, which is more patience than most September sowings have left. Specifics beat guesswork here. Grand Rapids is the loose-leaf variety to grab, and hardened plants shrug off temperatures down to 20 degrees. 6 inches of soil is all it needs, making it the shallowest container on this entire list of leafy greens. Sow 1/8 of an inch deep, and thin gradually as you start eating the baby leaves. You pull a few outer leaves for tonight's dinner, and by next week the same plant has grown back enough for another round. Pick romaine or a head type instead. And you needed to have sown back in early August. Mid-September is already too late for that shape. You get salad without the bolt, without the bitterness that ruined your June crop. Number 7. Swiss chard. Chard looks like a fall showpiece in every seed catalog photo. Thick, colorful stalks, full-size leaves. Wait around for that exact photo in September, and you might be waiting past frost. The detail that usually gets buried entirely is that chard on the seed packet is really two different plants, depending on when you stop waiting. The full-size version, the one on the catalog cover, needs 50 to 60 days. Cut it early instead, and you are looking at a completely different timeline from the exact same packet of seed. Not a different plant, just a different patience level. I ran a baby leaf batch of Barry's chard next to a full-size Ford Hook giant sown the same week, and the difference showed up fast. The baby leaf variety was ready to cut in about 30 days. Full-size took twice that, sometimes longer, and Bright Lights, the multicolored stalk variety everyone wants for the photo, needs closer to 65. That is a full month of difference riding on nothing but which harvest size you were aiming for from the start. That's precisely what this means for your container. Either variety wants about 8 inches of soil and handles cold down to roughly 15 degrees. Fine from zone 3 through 10. You can start snipping outer leaves off the full-size type around day 40 if you get impatient, well before the whole plant is technically finished. And the color? Bright Lights still shows its full range of pink, orange, and yellow stems even cut small. So you are not trading away the reason you picked it in the first place. A gardener a few zones colder than mine waited for her chard to hit full catalog size before a hard freeze wiped it out overnight. The plants that got cut early as baby greens were already safely eaten, sitting in a bowl instead of a compost pile. In zone 4 through 6, do not wait on full size if your first frost is inside 6 weeks out. Cut it young instead, and you already have dinner on the table, while the neighbor's catalog photo chard is still waiting for a freeze that might beat it there first. Cut it young. Skip the wait. Number 8. Bok choy. Bok choy has a reputation as a spring crop, mostly because that's usually when people remember to plant it. September is when it actually behaves. This is the part every guide quietly skips. Spring bok choy bolts constantly because young plants get hit with a stretch of cold nights, then a warm spell, then cold again. This is the fall crop I'd tell a first-year container gardener to start with. Fall does not do that swing. The days just get steadily shorter and cooler, straight through. Inside the plant, something mechanical is at work. When a young bok choy sits through nighttime lows under 50 degrees for long enough, it reads that as winter having already happened. So it rushes to flower, thinking spring is here and it needs to seed out fast. What that actually means for your bok choy is simple. Skip the confused signal entirely by growing it in a season that never fakes a false winter. Down to specifics now. Mache choy is the dwarf variety built to shrug off heat, cold, and bolt triggers all at once, and toy choy finishes in 30 to 35 days if you want it even faster. Either one grows fine from zone 2 through zone 11 as a fall crop, and light frost down to about 25 degrees will not touch it. A baby variety only asks for 6 inches of soil, 30 to 45 days start to finish. You pull the plant at 6 inches tall, have it, and it's already dinner. No waiting for a full head to form. Reach for a full-size variety instead, and you need 8 to 10 inches of soil and 45 to 70 days. With a mid-September sowing, baby stays the safer bet. Cool weather is what keeps it from turning bitter and rushing to flower. Number 9. Mache, corn salad. This is the one I promised you at the start. Most gardeners in this country have never grown it, and it's still handing out fresh salad after everything else on this list has already quit for the winter. France calls it Mache. Old cookbooks call it corn salad or lamb's lettuce because it used to grow wild in European cornfields all winter long, feeding people when nothing else in the field survived. That is not a coincidence. It evolved over centuries to keep working at temperatures that shut every other leafy green in this list down completely. Here is the part that flips everything you would guess about growing it. Most crops on this list are racing the cooling soil of September. This one is waiting on it. So the cooling soil, the exact thing that worries you with every other crop on this list, is not a problem here. It is the trigger the seed has been waiting for the whole summer. Get the depth right, and the rest follows. You do not need a named variety. Mache mostly sells under its plain species name, Valerianella locusta, though some seed catalogs flag a small-seeded type as stronger flavored and better suited for winter harvest. It grows fine in zone 4 through 9 as a cold season annual, sometimes hanging on as a short-lived perennial in the milder end of that range. The plant stays a small rosette, 4 to 8 inches tall, so 6 to 8 inches of soil is plenty. Even a pot barely bigger than a cereal bowl. Sow it 1/4 to a 1/2 inch deep. Germination runs slower than everything else here, 10 to 14 days. So do not panic if it takes its time coming up. A full rosette is ready in 40 to 60 days, though you can start cutting the leaves well before that if you like them young and tender. A reader up in a cold winter state once told me she picked fresh greens from an unheated cold frame on a day the thermometer read single digits. Everything else in her yard was long done for the season. That was Mache. Below 5 degrees with no protection at all, even Mache can die. In zone 3 and colder, throw a layer of straw or a light cold frame over it, and it will carry you through the deep part of winter. This is the surprise I told you was coming, and there is still one more waiting right behind it. 5 degrees. It doesn't blink. And the very last one on this list isn't just a vegetable. It's 2 vegetables from 1 packet of seed. Number 10. Turnip, Hakurei. This is the plant that pays you twice for the same seed packet. You made it to the last one on this list, and it's the strongest close I've got for you. Every other crop here hands you 1 harvest. Turnip hands you 2, greens and root, off the exact same seed, from the exact same sowing. Grow Hakurei and you get a white, hybrid root that eats fine raw, straight off the cutting board. Alongside leafy greens you can pull off the same plant while the root is still filling in underground. First-time container gardeners tend to buy their winter greens and their winter root vegetables as 2 separate trips to the store. This collapses both into 1 seed packet and 1 pot. Something specific is happening at the root level here. Same trick as the carrots and kale already showed you. Cold flips stored starch into sugar, and the root comes out sweeter for it. Leave it in the ground through a few frosts instead of rushing to harvest early, and the flavor keeps improving entirely on its own. No extra work from you. Of everything on this list, this is the one I would not skip. Here's the number that actually matters. Hakurei needs 10 to 12 inches of soil, so the root has room to size up without getting cramped against the sides of the pot. The root itself is ready in about 38 days. The greens come even sooner, around 33 days if you're growing a leaf-focused variety like Alamo, or just thinning young leaves off any turnip while you wait on the root to fill in. Pull the root once it hits 2 to 3 inches across. Push past that size, and it turns pithy and sharp instead of crisp and mild. More trouble to eat than it's worth. An old gardener I know, the kind who's been working the same small plot for decades, taught me to treat turnip greens like a bonus crop. Cut a few outer leaves while the root is still filling in, and you're eating from the same plant twice before it's even ready to pull. Reach for a standard variety like Purple Top White Globe instead of Hakurei, and you're looking at 50 to 60 days start to finish, not 38. In a colder zone, that longer timeline means getting it in the ground earlier in September to beat that first hard frost with something worth harvesting. 1 seed, 2 harvests, 0 extra work. 10 crops, all of them going into the same soil that just gave up your tomatoes. The window for sowing them directly isn't closed. It's just narrower than most people think, and narrower for some of these than others. One more thing before you go outside. A cheap sheet of frost cloth from the hardware store, draped loosely over the pots on nights below freezing, buys you close to 2 extra weeks on the back end of the season. It doesn't change what you plant, it just stretches how long you get to keep eating it. So here's what to do next. This weekend, measure your 3 deepest empty containers, the ones that just gave up tomatoes or peppers. Sow radish in one, turnip in another. Both of them are still fast enough to beat the frost even if you're reading this in the middle of the month. Tell me which one of these 10 you're trying first. I read every comment and it's exactly how I decide what to cover next. The nursery wants you to think the season's over the day your tomato cage comes down. Your empty containers know better.